The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Friends in Recovery podcast, the podcast that is here to help you, a loved one, or a friend get started down the road to recovery. This is the Friends in Recovery podcast, brought to you by the Genesis House. Genesis House, providing a safe, nurturing environment to heal from addiction since 1992. Please be a friend and share our message with a friend on Podbean, iTunes, iHeartRadio, or YouTube. And now, here are your Friends in Recovery.
Hey, welcome everybody. Friends in Recovery podcast. Podcasting live from Studio 21 Podcast Café in the lovely city of Salem, New Hampshire. Nice to be here. Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, where's the other Ed?
I'm very disappointed he couldn't make it today.
That's all right.
And to top it off, my guest also couldn't make it and let me know 18 minutes before I arrived.
Well, and as you know, two Eds are better than one, but you're going to have to deal with just one today.
Two Eds are better than one, depending on who the two Eds are. Very good. So, yeah, today Ed was going to talk about time, the four-letter word, time, T-I-M-E. And it is a four-letter word to many of us. I think to most people. We're always on a schedule. We worry about the future, worry about our bills, our children, health, and our jobs. And, I mean, it could go on forever here. But I really think the word time, if they say in recovery, time, things I must endure, T-I-M-E, things I must endure. And I was thinking about that on the way up. My son's got a lot going on right now. He's selling his house. He's busy at work. He's moving. There's many things going on in his life, and he's a lot like me. So I reached out to him this morning and told him just try to keep it in the day and I need to be advised of that sometimes myself. We get carried away worrying about the future, and we forget all about this day like today. Beautiful out. I'm sober. My life's good. It's not great, but it's good. So, what's your opinion on time, Ed?
Well, I think, as you said, it's something that people are obsessed with. If you take recovery out of the equation, everybody, all you ever hear out of people nowadays is, I don't have enough time, not enough time. And I think what that does is it tends to put stress on people, which is not a good thing. Right. For folks that are in recovery. Time is a big stressor.
Certainly. And, when you first start out in recovery, getting there is very difficult, first of all. I can only estimate I probably thought about quitting booze and drugs probably 1,000 times. It was in my mind frequently the last year or so of my addiction. There was a time I'd be throwing my cocaine out the window when I'd be driving around at 3 a.m. and saying, "That's it, I'm done. I can't do this." I was torturing myself. I'd be dumping the booze out, bottle of booze I had with me, going home, and about 2 hours later, I'd be riding back the same route I came, looking for that little bag of coke, and it was just disgusting. My point is this: it took me a long, egregious, sleepless, torturous nights in days, but mostly nights, to get where I am. And when I finally made the decision, I was at a point where suicide looked like not just an answer, it looked like a comforting answer. Now, think of that. That type of thinking was giving me kind of peace of mind. It's over. I don't have to worry anymore. No one's going to find out, they'll think I was depressed, which I was. But that's what it took to get me to call a friend of mine to come over to my house at 3:45 in the morning. Told me he'd be back. He came back at 6, and he said, "Pack a bag, we're going." I had no idea where we were going, but I jumped in his van, and I took a few things with me, and off we went. And I ended up in a recovery hospital up in New Hampshire, 1986, October 17th. The Red Sox were in the World Series, and this facility I was at, it was called Seminal Point in Sunapee, New Hampshire. It was an old hunting lodge. It was a beautiful, just beautiful scenic hospital. And I spent 31 days there. And my whole life just kind of evolved and changed and got better. And I got some direction and understanding. And I got a clear head, more importantly.
31 days. Aren't programs usually 30? Did you need that extra
I needed
day?
that. I needed that extra day, exactly. No, I don't know why I was 31. I think they were trying to keep me longer. And the insurance said, no, that's it. He's got to leave. So, but my point is, when I got out of there, I had some tools. You know, I heard about AA. I was indoctrinated into AA, going to meetings there. They took us out twice to go to meetings. I found out how important it was to live one day at a time, which was very difficult for me back then. I hadn't paid a bill in months. My life was a mess. Financially, I've never been good with money. So my life has improved considerably, though. But anybody that knows me will be listening to this laughing, saying, yeah, you haven't really changed much as far as the money part goes. But, yeah, the word time, though, it's so important. When I stay up late sometimes and watch, I wake up at 2 in the morning and watch the news just to fall back to sleep, but I see all the commercials for the recovery hospitals. And because, they know they're targeting their audience, which is people that aren't sleeping and that need help, And if you're out there and if you're not sleeping and you do need help, it's not that difficult. You make it more difficult by imagining what's going to happen. And basically, if you surrender and go get help, all that's going to happen is people are going to help you to get your head clear. If you're an opiate addict, if you're snorting perks, or if you're doing heroin or fentanyl, you're playing Russian roulette. But more importantly, you can get well.
So, Mike, as far as recovery goes, are there differences for the person who may be addicted to opioids versus, somebody who's got a problem with alcohol, or it all amounts to the same thing in the end?
Right. No, I think it's different. I really do.
I think the trajectory to become addicted is certainly very different. Right?
Certainly, yes. And but there was a study done at Johns Hopkins Hospital years ago. I think it was in the 70s. And basically, they had 2 cadavers. One was a heroin addict brain, and the other was an alcoholic brain. And the doctor who did this presentation showed the similarities in the damage to the brain. In layman's terms, you're getting it from me. I don't know. I don't know the names of the parts of the brain, but basically the damage that was done to the alcoholic brain was very similar to the heroin addict's brain. I know for a fact that I've seen it when I was driving the police wagon, which people call the paddy wagon, but that's very politically incorrect nowadays. Do not say that. I would pick up a lot of people in an 8-hour shift. Because I was in recovery, if I saw somebody that was living out in the street, I worked in Lowell, it's a big city, yep. I'd find somebody behind a building or in an alleyway sleeping on the street. I would check on them, and usually I would take them in and I put them in protective custody just so they'd have a place to sleep. But what I learned was a lot of these guys, they'd be there 3 or 4 hours, and all of a sudden they'd be raging because they needed something. And the old cops, I came on in 1980, the old cops that had come on in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, the guy I relieved was a man who drove the wagon. He had a desk in the garage where we kept the police wagon, and in the desk was all types of booze. Booze he had taken from people, bottles of wine, nips, pints, quarts. So lots of times we would give these raging alcoholics, a couple of
So
nips.
it was full service. You could say what kind you wanted, even.
Well, they never really complained. They were good customers. So we can talk more about it after the break. All right, Ed. See you in a minute.
Genesis House is a premier substance abuse and rehabilitation facility located in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. We have been providing the highest quality of addiction treatment since 1992 and are accredited by the Joint Commission. We offer a range of programs that include detox, residential treatment, dual diagnosis, a Christian track for people who want to incorporate their faith into treatment, a uniform services track, and we work with most major insurance carriers. Genesis House is led by a dedicated team of administrative and clinical professionals, and we stand on our commitment to excellence in recovery services. Contact us today to find out more about our program. Take the first step and call Genesis House at 800-737-0933 or visit us on the web at www.genesishouse.net. That's 800-737-0933 or www.genesishouse.net. Begin your journey to a long and successful recovery with Genesis House.
Catchy little beat. Well, it's nice to be back. So, before the break, we were talking about recovery and the difference between opioid addiction, alcohol addiction, any addiction. The primary purpose, obviously, is to get somebody sober, and the methods that they use, I think, and I had a conversation with a very astute gentleman yesterday who is very knowledgeable. He's also recovering professional athlete, and just a wealth of knowledge about recovery, and it makes so much sense, is that using the 12 steps of recovery, the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous recovery. If any facility is not using that in one way or another, I think that they're making a huge mistake. I think they're in business for the wrong reason. I really believe that. I think they're in business for money, and maybe their heart's in the right place, but I really believe that if you're not, this is a threefold disease, addiction. It's a mental, physical, and spiritual. And I don't care if you're an atheist, you're agnostic, it doesn't matter. You have to believe in something that's more powerful than you. Nature, look at a thunderstorm, lightning. I mean, something is more powerful than you. So if you're not using the 12 steps of recovery to guide people.
Well, now, there are people who obviously have gotten sober without.
Certainly.
Right?
Certainly.
But so your opinion is it's less likely, or it depends more on the individual? Or?
Yeah, I think it's definitely less likely. First of all, statistically, getting people to get sober, which is alcohol or drug-free, 100%. The stats aren't that great in the favor of the person getting sober. So it's a strenuous journey,
Yep.
But if you're able to read, see, the thing about the 12 steps or the Alcoholics Anonymous book of recovery is it's like Prego spaghetti sauce. Everything you need for recovery is in there, and then some. I found by getting sober, just getting away from the strenuous task of search and seeking, trying to get what I needed. Even when I got what I needed, I didn't think I had enough, because I'd be worrying. I'd have enough for 3 days. I'd be worrying about the 4th day. It just was never enough. But what I learned when I started reading the step book, which 12 steps of recovery, I read step 1, 2, and 3, was there was another part of me that had been dead, that had been lying dormant, that just wasn't awake, and that was my spirituality. And I'm not talking about being a Jesus freak or a Christian freak, a reborn, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just talking about what I enjoyed out of life. And I'll give you an example. As I got up one morning and I was taking a walk, and I noticed that was in the spring, and I noticed the leaves were, and there were leaves on trees, there were flowers blooming, there were birds singing, and I hadn't heard that in years, and that little bit of nature, knocking on my my brain, telling me, hey, look, it's not too bad out here. I think I got that piece, so I could observe that from reading steps 1, 2, and 3. I admitted that I had a problem with drugs and alcohol. My life had certainly become unmanageable, and I needed something or someone to help me get back to where I was going. And by going to AA meetings every day for years, for 5 years, 6 years, I can honestly say I ran to them. I got to them without anybody pushing me. In the very beginning, it was difficult. I'd go to them. I'd go to the meetings. I'd sit there. I'd be edgy. I was afraid who I'd see. I was a policeman. I worked in the city. I was getting sober. But then after a while, I started keeping the focus on what was going on in my life. People that I did recognize, they were just there for the same reason. But the recovery through the 12 steps definitely got me where I am today, because if I had just gone and quit on my own and just went on with my life, I wouldn't have had a spiritual wellness. I wouldn't have I might have a physical wellness, but I definitely would not have a mental wellness. Those 12 steps of recovery have given me the ability to have a mental wellness, and I'm still not that stable.
Right, and we used to have the step guy come in.
Yes, Rich the step guy. I hope Rich is doing well.
Yeah, I'm only familiar with the first, I think, 6 steps because that's where Rich left off.
I know.
But, I mean, it seems to me that a big part of it is it's a recipe for recovery. It gives structure
certainly
to your way of thinking and your way of conducting yourself. So even aside from the alcohol dependency, it's a set of rules
certainly
to live your life by.
I used to get major panic attacks, anxiety attacks, whatever you want to call them. I was about 14 months sober, and it was scary. It was scary. I can't describe it any other way than it just incapacitated me. I could not drive. I could not stand in line at a market. I could not. I felt like something was going to happen and it wasn't going to be good, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know how to stop it. And the only way I could deal with it was reading steps 1, 2, and 3, because someone at a meeting, an older man, an old timer as we call him, said to me, yeah, those are the unknown fears. I was talking about my anxiety. And back then, anxiety wasn't a word I don't think I ever spoke it. I just said, I'm afraid. I can't sleep. I wake up thinking I'm not going to ever wake up again. I can't drive. I feel like something's possessed me, that I have tunnel vision, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose control. And this old timer said to me, those are the unknown fears they talk about in the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And he said, you read steps 1, 2, and 3 as much as you can. And I tell you, I read those steps probably 10 times a day. It took about 16 minutes to read all 3 of them. And I would read them. I'd feel good. Sometimes I wouldn't. I'd read them again. But all of a sudden it started catching, because it was getting through my thick skull that I am an alcoholic. I am a drug addict. It's not going to change. I can get better. And I can honestly say I've never left an AA meeting or a step book meeting or a big book meeting feeling worse than when I walked in. I always feel better no matter what's going on in my life. I lost a brother in recovery. I lost 4 good friends in a plane crash in recovery. I mean, we all have our losses, The recovery part for me, the most important part has been 12 Steps Big Book. If you're out there and you're sick and you're suffering and you really feel like you have no one to call, you don't know what to do, you can call me, 978-746-1717. There's a number that's flashing across.
1-800-737-0933.
Yes, and that's our friends at Genesis House, who I want to thank for sponsoring this show for the last 16 months. These shows are very, very instrumental to many people getting well. Call either of those numbers, 746-1717.
Or 1-800-737-0933.
Who's better than Ed Sullivan?
I'm right on top of things.
Man,
over
you
here.
are on top. You're like a producer extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.